So the past few months, I have been loving on an album that came out about a year ago from New York Festival of Song, which their motto is "No song is safe from us," which I love. They've been around since the 80s. And they put on really beautiful, innovative, thoughtful programs of art song, traditional art song, lieder, chanson, new American settings, and sometimes juxtaposed with, other classical works, and sometimes even really interestingly, juxtaposed with pop stuff or crossover stuff or stuff that you wouldn't expect. So this album from last year, from a concert they did, I think last January, was the Beatles and Schubert. And you're like, I don't know about that. Anyway, a lot of the arrangements were really beautiful. The curation of songs was very thoughtful. It wasn't necessarily what I thought they would pick, but it was just enough of things you knew and a lot of things you weren't expecting. There's many things I love about the album. There's some things that, maybe I would do differently too. But on the whole, I found it quite compelling. And so I highly suggest it. But I think why I really loved it was that it reminds me of something I speak of often with other musicians. And it's an aesthetic ideal that I do aspire to, which is that whatever I'm singing, if it's a pop song, an aria, a traditional chanson or art song, or something in between, a folk song, I wish to approach it like art song. I know where I got that phraseology from. It was a review of Audra McDonald in about 2006 or 7 of an album she recorded, which were all like pop songs. There was a Rufus Wainwright song, and I don't even remember who else, but they weren't theater composers. They weren't classical composers. These weren't works written for her, but she sang it with her voice, just like the gypsy that, people were like, oh, should she be singing gypsy? She sang it with her voice, regardless of whether it worked for you or it didn't. And one of the reviewers commented on that, whatever she sings turns to art song because she approaches it with a rigor and a discipline and an honesty of singing with a trained instrument, an instrument that can do things that certain pop singers might not be able to do. And yet that's who she is, honestly, as a musician, and just what is the fullness of her musical expression. And so this album really reminds me of that because it captures that. And also, always enjoyed the Beatles, but gave me a new respect for them as storytellers in this Schubertian sense of, being able to tell a story that is accessible, compelling, sometimes poignant, in a really effortless musical vernacular. And Ned Rorem, the composer and writer, known to be somewhat pretentious and elitist, he wrote about one of the songs on the album back in the day. He said that it's on par with anything Schubert ever wrote. And so it was not just, these curators of this concert that are onto that. I think anyone who has done a deep dive into art song literature would see that the Beatles, just like Jacques Brel or Noel Coward or Ivor Novello or other people that are probably more well-known, they're all a little bit somewhat classical. Their work is just as legitimate in an art song sense, right? And so it kind of goes back to that Larilenia, Kurt Weill, increasingly broad understanding that good music is good music. There's no high, there's no low. If it moves you, it moves you. Duparc once said of the music he wished to write, he's like, I wish to be moved and I wish to write music that moves people, full stop. And so go listen to the album. It's very different than how you're used to hearing the Beatles. It's definitely sung with, some classical bravado, but I think it also in many ways is like a great loving tribute to how compelling the Beatles' music can be because it shows the wide range in which it can be honestly and compellingly deployed.